Okay, we're back in the booth. We're riding off of that hyperfixative high, full of energy, ready to go. Part 2, let's do it. In this video, I'm going to cover the first 2 scenes of the movie and talk a little bit about Totsuko, the main character. So the movie opens with Totsuko praying in a chapel. She's reciting the Serenity Prayer, which I talked about in the first video, talking about accepting the things that she can't change, working on fixing the things that she can change, and being able to tell the difference between the two. In an interview in the guidebook, Naoko was asked by the interviewer why spirituality and religion have become a more prominent part of her works more recently. And the interviewer even said that this first scene felt like a direct continuation from the prayer to the Heike that Tokiko recites at the end of Heike Monogatari, where she talks about wishing her family well in the afterlife and just accepting everything that's happened to her. In response to the question, Naoko didn't mention anything about death. While I bet that's part of it, it's not what she wanted to focus on. She said that the main reason that spirituality and religion were included in her most recent works is that she's really inspired by people who are able to devote their lives to something, and are able to make it their reason for living and accepting themselves. She makes a direct connection between this and creating art as a means to devoting yourself to something and accepting yourself. Devoting yourself to art and music and the joy of creating something with your friends is something beautiful to strive for, and I'm glad it's represented in this movie. Religion's a cool metaphor to represent it. God bless art. I don't think Naoko's a super religious person, and this is her way of showing us that she's taken the Christianity pill or anything. This movie is actually pretty casual in how it portrays religion. I've already seen a few interviews online where Naoko talks about being fully aware that not all kids who go to Catholic schools are actually Catholic. I think she even had a percentage where she stated that, only 10% of the students who go to these schools actually are Catholic. This is definitely true. I've worked at a few Catholic schools myself. Lots of the kids I talked to said that they had no interest in religion, and they're not perfect little angels either. One student who I got along well with actually got suspended while I was there. He got suspended for doing donuts on the school oval. I think if you were more conscious about your faith, I don't think you would do that. He was still a good lad though. But yeah, even Naoko being more aware of this and treating Catholicism a bit more casually, I think it's great that she still gets the most out of the setting, and that she shows someone who actually has a healthy and loving relationship towards Catholicism. There's problems on the way, but as I said in the first video, it's not antagonistic or anything like that. This chapel looks really beautiful. The chairs and the walls and the pillars and everything have so much detail. You can see the rafters as well. It's all so intricate. I can easily imagine the smell of varnish and old people looking at these images. And the stained glass on the ceiling, the Mario 64 stained glass, I don't know what it's fucking called, I'm sorry. But it's in the shape of a flower, because of course it is. I just want to quickly mention that I am not versed in flower language at all. I'm completely illiterate. So if there's a scene with flowers, I'm unfortunately not going to be able to break down the meaning. I'm sorry. In the Heike Monogatari guidebook, there's actually explanations of each of the flowers in the show and what they mean on some of the pages. But unfortunately, the colours within one didn't have the same treatment, so I'm left in the dark. I've read in an interview before that Naoko said that she likes including flowers in her work because flowers emit this natural beauty that man-made stuff can't replicate or that you can't get anywhere else. So yeah, she just likes soaking up the beauty of the natural world. There's a great blog from a writer called Atelier Emily, who does know a bit more about flower language and is able to break it down in Naoko's work. So I definitely recommend their writing. I bet they'll have something on the colours within. But yeah, back to the religious talk. Whoops. Naoko said that she wanted the chapel to feel very sacred for Totsuko. There's no music in the scene, it's very quiet, and she likened the experience of Totsuko being here to being in the womb, which I find really sweet. The chapel's completely empty, and it's really only Totsuko in there. I really like how Naoko always has her main characters inhabit rooms and spaces alone in her works. It really allows you to feel their intimacy with that space, and the deep connection that they have to mundane things. In K-On! And Liz, you've got the club rooms where the characters practice alone, and in this movie you have the chapel and another church which we'll talk about later, which comes up in the movie. Naoko mentioned that the design of the interiors and the lighting within them was inspired by painter Wilhelm Hammershøi, and also the movie Into Great Silence. This movie follows monks in the French Alps in a monastery, and just what their life looks like and just how quiet and devoted and full on they are pretty much. I think the inspo's clear to see and how well negative space is used, just how articulate the lighting is, and how somber it is, but it's not really depressing, it's more just really sleepy and soft and relaxing. Naoko's taste in art is super cracked, and it's really great to see her bringing these inspirations into this movie. I think borrowing and enhancing things from different mediums is one of the best things that you can do as an artist, and one of the most important skills. It allows you to share ideas and the different types of joy that you can create using different techniques or looking at things from certain perspectives and angles. Things that people working in the same medium usually wouldn't do. In my comics, even though everything's hand-drawn, I take a lot of inspiration from music and how people write lyrics and how mixing is done. I really like the textures that people can create through production and mixing, and I try to put that in my line art. Whereas lyrics influence how I word dialogue and prose. And as you know, Naoko brings so much music into her work as well, and shares the joys that music can bring, and all the nerdy stuff which comes with representing equipment and how it works. Naoko says that she doesn't take inspiration from a lot of anime. I think part of that is because a lot of anime is shit, but she specifically said that she doesn't like taking things which have already been made by other people's imaginations, and that she wants to take things from the real world instead, so that she can transmit it in her own way. Like, yeah, even with this painter and this movie, those works have much more dark, earthy tones. Whereas this, even though it takes inspiration from it, you get it with Naoko's pastels and vibrancy and softness. And the more of these inspirations you add to your work and make them harmonize in a cohesive way, the more interesting and unique to you it will become. The last thing I wanted to mention here is that I've seen a few reviews already saying that they think seeing anime girls pray and doing things like make the sign of the cross looks really cursed and funny. And I actually kind of agree with them, but it's part of the reasons why I like this movie as well. The main reason for that is that what other anime are you going to see girls do the sign of the cross? It's probably rare in the broader world of animation as well. I think this movie has just birthed a ton of new sakuga, which you can't get anywhere else. It's similar to when KyoAni had to learn how to animate sign language for a silent voice. It takes so long to observe and understand those gestures and to draw them and to animate them properly. It's an extreme labour of love. But whoops, accidentally spent like 8 minutes analysing the first 20 seconds of the movie. But don't worry, I think a lot of stuff that I talked about kind of covers a lot of the thematic and visual philosophy of the entire movie. So hopefully it cuts down on the explanations later into the video series. That's what I'm hoping for anyway, fingers crossed. Okay, so now we get to talk about Totsuko, and oh my god, she's such a fun and endearing and silly character. She's the heart and the soul of this movie, and she gives it a lot of its unique appeal, which you can't find anywhere else in the coming-of-age genre. I think most of these movies have kind of mopey, dopey, depressed protagonists. But Totsuko, while she is a sad person, which we'll explore later, she's just got endless amounts of energy and excitement and enthusiasm for the world. Watching the trailers for this movie, you can kind of get an idea of what Totsuko will be like, but watching the movie itself, like, I was not expecting this character to be, like, so insane and munted in just how silly she is. She's super curious, super loving, super gay, very, very gay, and she's constantly spinning around. We'll talk about spinning in a second. She's voiced by the actress Sayu Suzukawa. As far as anime voices go, the voice acting in this movie is very realistic, more down to earth. It's got a very relaxing quality to it, very soft, but not in like a moe, gross, poo-poo wee-wee way. Suzukawa's a very young voice actress. She's only like, I think 1 or 2 years younger than I am, so it helps better match the age of Totsuko, and relate to the emotions and the thoughts of the character. This is actually Suzukawa's first voice acting role in animation specifically. In fact, all of the 3 main characters in this movie are doing voice acting for anime for the first time, and have more experience in traditional live action roles. I really like it when projects do this because again, it's bringing inspiration from different mediums to create something new and think of solutions and ways of acting which aren't present in anime most of the time. Apparently these 3 actors were chosen from a pool of like 1,000 to 1,500 applicants. So yeah, they were really fussy with exactly what they wanted to get out of the characters in this movie. We'll talk about the scene which goes over Totsuko's backstory now. It's a very avant-garde scene, it's as avant-garde as this movie gets. And what makes it super interesting and captivating is that it's a very glossy and abstract and colourful scene, and the emotions and the dialogue on top of it are quite subdued. But it actually shows a very genuine heartbreak that Totsuko's experiencing while growing up. It shows that pain and sadness can exist in unexpected places, and that people suffer in small ways even if not overtly. It shows Totsuko falling out of love with ballet, and how her biggest source of happiness has become alienating. She talks about how she sees people's souls or auras as colours, and how it causes her to feel weird about herself, because no one else around her sees things the same way. She talks to her parents about the colours she attributes to them, but they don't really understand. And things like her artwork look completely different to everyone else in the class, and she feels like she doesn't fit in. She's shown surrounded by multiple multicolored stick figures, but they're all wobbly and unclear and widely spaced out, showing a sense of distance. She talks about how she's not able to identify her own colour despite being able to see everyone else's, and we're shown how she can't keep up with ballet practice just through a few subtle cuts. She's trying to learn this piece called Giselle, which we will definitely talk about later in the series. It's a very important and layered symbol. All of these things illustrate Totsuko's lack of her sense of self, and the things she perceives as weird or imperfect about herself. It's a very sad, femme-celly scene, despite being full of rainbows and dolphins and girls doing ballet. And it's even more heavy if we're viewing this through the lens of queerness or autism, in that Totsuko relates to the world and perceives things differently than most people do, and because of that she feels really excluded. Ushio's music is also perfect here too. You've got this piano melody which is very simplistic but also very playful to reflect Totsuko's youth, and the sound of either a clock or a metronome and a school bell to signify the passing of time, as we see Totsuko progress from preschool to primary school to high school. The music isn't melodramatic, sad string stuff. It's cheerful and colourful, but again, it underplays Totsuko's suffering. She's framed to be apathetic or unaware of what she's missing out on in her life, which makes the scene even more sad. It illustrates the amount of distance between Totsuko and ballet, and how quickly time's flown by with that distance only growing larger. All of this sounds very depressing so far, and I probably used the word sad like 10 times, but we'll come to see in this movie how easy it is to fall back in love with art again, and how its presence never really goes away. Art is ready to invite you back in at any time, and your friends and your experiences will help you along the way. So Naoko chose ballet because she watched a recital performed by a niece of hers, and Naoko said that she likes ballet as a form of art because it requires effort and love to be exerted out of your entire body. Doing the poses and the moves, or whatever the steps are called in ballet, requires you to physically express it, and to really put your all in it. This is wonderfully exemplified with Totsuko's character and how she's always jumping around and spinning everywhere, showing the boundless amount of love in her heart. And ballet also introduces spinning as one of the key motifs of the movie, which is meant to represent love, uncontainable excitement, and fated attraction. Spinning is also related to the orbit of planets later in this movie, which I think represents finding deep connection in the empty, meaningless void of space, or in a place where connections are hard to make. In terms of other talking points, while synesthesia is being used as one of the main things to market this movie, it isn't actually explored super heavily. It's more just used as a device to show how Totsuko perceives the world in a different way to others, and how she has the ability to see the true beauty in people that most people can't see. She also eventually has to learn to see the beauty and colour within herself. In terms of the genuine representation of synesthesia, queerness, and autism, Naoko has said that she doesn't like to attribute labels to her characters, or say that they are this or that particular way. This is because she wants to explore the individuality of her characters' thoughts and feelings outside of these labels. So if we use Totsuko as an example, she's not just a lesbian who deals with lesbian problems, and if we were to describe her without this label, we can say that she's a very affectionate person, who's also very energetic and curious, and sees the values in others, but not herself. And this means she feels distant from others, even when she really wants to connect. We know she still likes girls, but we get a wider picture with this description, rather than just defaulting to what a lesbian is, and making it an all-encompassing part of her personhood. I think part of this may have to just do with Japan's general lack of acceptance of diversity, and that exploring these things wouldn't fly very well in a corporate anime executive room. In a way, it denies and hides the visibility of diversity, and I don't think that's very good. But I think Naoko's perspective is still very mature and benefits her movies. While I definitely see queerness and autism in her characters, her work shows you what's going on in the lives of these characters that exist beyond simple labels, and don't feel the need to tick certain boxes or expectations about how characters should be represented. This allows us to embrace and understand the characters for who they are, not who they should be. When I think about stories with good representation, the characters are just represented as they are, without it needing to be mentioned, and there's no virtue signaling or a sensed feeling of forcedness. This also brings me to the topic of body diversity in this anime. While I don't think anime will ever be body positive, as so much of its design philosophy is inherently built upon ironing out quote-unquote flaws, and most of these things are just normal human features like noses and wrinkles and pimples, Totsuko's pudgier design is still very refreshing to see, and I really love it. Apparently her roundness and movement were inspired by dolphins, and it gives her so much personality, and she reminds me of a small beluga whale or something like that. The long braids in her hair also fly around when she moves to help accentuate her movement further, especially when she's spinning. They've done a great job at creating a cute and endearing character that feels more human and not a plastic surgery idle moe blob. Again, it's not perfect, but Naoko always tries to make her characters feel more human. I'm going to conclude this first video by talking about some of the animation direction in this segment, and how it relates to the direction of the movie as a whole, as well as other animated movies. This part gets a bit ranty and pessimistic about the animation industry, so if your patience runs thin with it, feel free to stop listening or to prove me wrong in the comments. But yeah, anyway, the animation in this first segment of the movie is quite flashy and experimental. There's waves of pulsating rainbow waves to represent how eyes perceive light. There's transforming images of Totsuko's childhood drawings to represent her energetic imagination and perception. And it's all shown in a blissful violet void full of rainbow flowers and butterflies. What anchors it down really well is the more grounded and studied animation of the kids doing ballet, where the animators do a great job at precisely depicting how Totsuko's moments of fidgeting and lagging behind make her unable to follow the routine. Kids can be hard to animate in movies because of their different proportions, clumsier movement, and most people who study animation have more practice animating adult bodies. Add ballet into the equation and it makes the animator's job especially hard. But the sakuga here is really great, and Totsuko's voice actor said she especially liked watching this scene. Most animated movies use all the time and resources they have to show off in a wide, general way, with lots of ranging styles and set pieces and visual splendor. They want to take advantage of the medium of animation after all. However, this movie focuses more on the small scope of stuff it's preoccupied with, for a short and sweet experience, and most of the really succulent pieces of animation are found in the delicate and mundane character animation. This first part of the movie is really the most it goes off the rails in terms of abstract and show-offy animation and imagery, and it's still pretty readable and surface level in the grand scheme of things. While I usually find grounded things boring and I like more experimental stuff, this movie is executed so well that it just wins me over anyway. I find that most experimental feature-length animation has really great ideas but just really arse execution. The art design that they'll have is amazing, but the animation itself is very floaty and undisciplined, and its visual language doesn't use animation, timing, or editing well to leave an impact on you, outside of a cheap thrill. This also leads to the movie sacrificing narrative elements for wank, and it can make the experience feel very hollow. I feel like a lot of these movies would work better as comics, where they can focus more on developing captivating still images that focus purely on its design and telling a story without the need for movement. They also don't need to fill bloated hour 30-minute runtimes with narratives that either feel too aimless or too structured, and can be the concise length that they need to be. This movie also feels divorced from a lot of annoying expectations of commercial animated movies, whether that be through visual grandness, using CGI, using a fantastical gimmick to drive the story ahead, or using boring moralistic storytelling tropes. When watching the trailers for this movie, you can feel the people who made them really struggle to find usual dramatic hooks to advertise, focusing very heavily on the synesthesia gimmick, which the movie doesn't even use all that much. Most animated movies still feel way too oriented for kids. While I think it's definitely insecure and ignorant to say that kids' movies can't be good, or that they can't tackle mature themes, I think the current mold and way that kids' movies and even a lot of contemporary animation for adults is written is still so structured and didactic and visually samey. While anime is a very visually homogeneous and tedious medium, most Western animation still has so many of its roots in Disney in how characters emote and how things are expected to be animated, and is much more restrictive in not only what things can look like but also what can be portrayed. Everything needs to fit within the mold of being fantastical or action-oriented, or having a sense of world building or lore. Even things that are watched and respected by adults, like the Spider-Verse movies and Arcane, are still dumb superhero or video game tie-ins that need to communicate using storytelling tropes of these mediums, and I find it super limiting to what people can make. And we all know how ironic and snarky and sitcom-y and ugly adult animation is. Well, it's super reductionist to critique these works on their surface level qualities, and there's still so much talent and craft that goes into them, and a lot of them are still genuinely very good. I think it's still fair to say that the diversity of work that is being produced in animation is leagues behind film and comics, in terms of subject matter and how things are visually represented. I think a lot of the stuff that people would point to me as being the most crazy or diverse stuff happening in animation right now would be stuff made by art students and people in the underground, whose work is great but never gets the recognition or funding to make the big projects that they deserve. And maybe their work works best as shorts or music videos, but I would love more full-length movies that explore their ideas. I think one of the reasons that Ghibli movies are so compelling is that even though they have become so commercial and are quite soft and wholesome, they value craft and emotional honesty over anything else. While the movies still have really strong and important messaging, there's so much appeal and artistry and memorable scenes in the movies outside of just its themes. The arcs and the development of the characters is usually less structured, and it allows the movies to surprise you and go into weird directions that need little hand-holding or explanation, or even wider purpose in the narrative. This also helps the stories feel more lifelike and real, rather than an overly meticulous set track. Ghibli movies have important morals, but they aren't being shoved down your throat in the same way a Pixar movie would do so. A lot of them tackle ideas which are really personal to the directors, like war, but does it in a way that isn't coaxed with metaphors or idealism. A lot of modern artists mimic the visual presentation and softness of Ghibli, but either aren't able to match the craft of them, or don't tap into the emotional honesty as much as Miyazaki and Takahata do. A lot of this discussion has been very negative and gatekeepy, and there's still lots of worthwhile animation coming out today. However, I still firmly believe that removing a lot of these corporate barriers and expectations of animation would help the medium grow much more. This movie feels very free from any corporate obligations, even with its marketable music and dances. I don't think it's the craziest or most revolutionary work ever, and a lot of it's built on pure bread and butter fundamentals that most Kyoani works are known for, but I still think it's a lot better and more free than most movies. I think a lot of people won't understand this movie because they're trying to see it through the more structured lens of something like Your Name or even A Silent Voice, or something as grand as a Ghibli movie, and aren't understanding the specific and weird appeal of what it's going for. But once you remove these expectations, you do get something really special. Thank you for reaching the end of this part. This has started to become more structured and scripted than I'd like, but it seems to be quicker to film this way than trying to land the improvised clips. Hopefully the analysis is a bit sharper that way too, but we'll see. In the next video, I'm going to try to cover Totsuko's dorm mates, Kimi as a character, and how intimacy is expressed in this movie. Okay, bye!